you everybody for giving up this wintry Wednesday evening to spend the next 45 to 50 minutes or so being serenaded by the voice of my lovely colleague Ian Loyd. He's going to be talking to you all about Sri Lanka. He is the product manager putting together the trips that we offer there, and he visited earlier this year. So he's going to be primarily talking about his Rare Mammals in Style group trip that he will be leading in both 2025 and in 2026. But you're not here to talk about me or listen to me blabber on. So essentially, if you want to get in touch during the presentation, please use the chat facility or the Q&A, and I will endeavour to help. There will be a questions and answer section at the end of the trip, but in the meantime, I'm going to hand over to Ian, and he's going to tell you all about Sri Lanka. Over to you, Ian.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, HB, and good evening, everybody. I'm delighted to be talking to you this evening about Sri Lanka. I'm lucky enough to have been there on a couple of occasions, most recently in March this year. And the trip, like Kate said, I'm going to mostly be speaking about this evening is our Sri Lanka's Rare Mammals in Style. So, where is Sri Lanka? It's the teardrop-shaped island to the south of India. It's part of the Indian subcontinent, but it's very distinct, although it shares many similarities with India. It's an island roughly the same size as Ireland, so it's pretty small, and it's known for its high levels of endemism. So that means lots of species that are unique just to Sri Lanka. For example, 25% of all its plants are endemic, 21 species of mammal are endemic, 34 birds, and 90% roughly of its amphibians are endemic just to Sri Lanka. The country is also regarded as a biodiversity hotspot. The reason for this is it has a wide range of climatic zones. We can see here there's a dry zone, a wet zone, an intermediate zone between these two climates, and also an area that's very arid. In addition to this, Sri Lanka has an area in the sort of central south of hills. Actually, some of these reach sort of 2,500 meters in altitude. So this hill country has its own microclimate as well. And that's again an area that has many species that are unique just to that specific area. So as a whole, Sri Lanka is very rich in wildlife. For its size as an island, it's regarded as having the highest diversity of mammals anywhere in the world. There's 91 species of terrestrial mammal and plenty of marine mammals as well. Over 500 species of bird as well have been recorded. So it's a real biodiversity hotspot. In addition to being a haven for wildlife, it's a fantastic holiday destination. This is the Kalpitiya Peninsula in the northwest. And this area, along with many other beaches on the east coast and the south, areas of stunning golden sand beaches. It's also got incredibly friendly people, fascinating ancient history, and brilliant food as well. Sri Lanka is known for lots of fresh tropical fruits, but also for its curries. These are generally milder than those you might find in India. There's a lot more coconut and cinnamon used in them. And there's been influences from the Malay, the Dutch, India, and of course their own unique dishes and cuisines. You could really do an entire itinerary around Sri Lanka just enjoying all of the different cuisine on offer. It's really special. You might also be wondering about drink, whether that might be your cup of tea. Well, there's no shortage of tea in Sri Lanka as well. If you head up into the hill country, you'll come across lots of tea plantations, and Sri Lanka is known for its particularly green tea and just producing lots of very flavoursome teas that are found and exported all over the world. So the first itinerary I'm going to go through this evening is our Sri Lanka's rare mammals itinerary. This is a great trip to just highlight what wonderful natural history Sri Lanka has. And how we've laid this itinerary out is, rather than rushing around and having lots of different locations and packing up and moving on, we've just picked two wildlife hotspots that also have very nice accommodation. And these two locations are perfect for having wildlife very close to us and places that we can visit on day trips from them. So they form great bases. And with this, we can combine some of its most iconic mammals and great bird life, historical sites, nice accommodation, and also be looking for the secretive, the elusive, and often nocturnal, lesser known, but equally charismatic and fascinating smaller mammals as well. So with these locations, there's lots of potential. The first location is marked as Ville Uyana on the map here, and that's the accommodation we stay at in Sigiriya, the first base. And then we move to Clawton Wild, which is a lodge just outside of Wilpatu National Park. You can say it's a 12-day itinerary, starting and ending in Colombo, but we still spend the night in Negombo, which is the nearest sort of town to the airport. So this is the Sigiriya Rock, also known as Lion's Rock. This incredible site is often referred to as the eighth wonder of the world. And in addition to having this incredible fortress on the top of a 200-meter high granite rock, the terraces around the bottom of the rock and the water gardens and systems that they'd put in place many thousands of years ago are really, they were ahead of their time in terms of the engineering, and it is quite mind-boggling to think how they were designing these things back then. So in addition to the history here, as you can see, the landscape is very rich in forests, and it's a great area for wildlife too. This is where we stay. It's a lodge called Jetwing Ville Uyana, very comfortable, sustainably built property. We stay in these lovely two-story dwellings, each with their own private plunge pool. Very nice accommodation here. And the architecture is really special. As you can see, the surroundings of this lodge is very lush and there's lots of water. From this aerial photograph as well, you can see Sigiriya Rock in the background there, and the mosaic of habitats that are bordering the lodge grounds. There's lots of rice paddies here, natural forests and wetlands, and the vicinity of the lodge itself is particularly exciting. So the inspiration for this lodge came from the owner who visited the London Wetland Centre many years ago and was completely inspired by how that site, sort of derelict brownfield site, had been transformed into a thriving wildlife nature reserve in the heart of London and what could be done. And they took some derelict rice paddies here and have transformed it not only into offering this lovely accommodation, but also it's a haven for wildlife. They dug ponds, planted native trees, and now there's a staggering biodiversity that we can find just within the grounds. 160 species of bird have been recorded, 31 mammals, over 40 reptiles, 60 butterflies, and they keep growing the list each year. As we enter, we'll almost certainly hear before we see peacocks. They're a wonderful bird to just start off our Sri Lankan journey with. And just to show how much wildlife there is just in the grounds, I took this picture walking up the steps to the restaurant. It's a marsh mugger crocodile. She's a female that's resident in the main lake. She came naturally alongside all the fish that have naturally colonized the site. And she's laid several clutches of eggs here. She's very happy. And it shows how quickly they've established, full ecosystems here. There's grey-headed fish eagle resident and so many birds and butterflies to just see just walking around. And Viliana is a perfect example of somewhere that has just really well blended, quite impressive architecture with creating space for wildlife. Even the walls are Art Deco. And one of the reasons we stay here is for its nocturnal mammals. This is a grey slender loris. It's one of the species we hope to see just within the grounds. They've actually created a sort of dedicated loris reserve here in a patch of woodland that sort of borders the edge of the premises. And there's at least 20 loris in there. And we use red or pink light torches to observe them, which means they're not bothered at all and they continue to sort of go about their evening foraging. We're particularly mindful because their large eyes, they're very sensitive to light, being a completely nocturnal species. And lorises are particularly interesting. They are insectivorous, tailless primates. They're a member of the procimans. So this is the sort of pre-monkey era of primates that dates back a very long time. Procimans include lemurs and tarsiers of Southeast Asia, galagos of Africa, and the lorises. And unlike slow lorises you find in other parts of Asia, the slender lorises are actually quite quick. So they move fairly nimbly and sort of with good sort of agility through the sort of canopy of lower shrubs. So we're able to observe them not too much above head height. On this occasion, we'd seen one that had just found a cricket underneath a leaf, and it was fascinating to just see how it found this cricket and then made a good meal out of it. We can usually locate them because of their high-pitched whistling contact calls as well. And as we walk around on a night walk, which is what we usually do just before dinner, just after sunset, we spend an hour usually sort of doing a walk around the lodge. It's all flat and easy walking. And we'll come across things like this Indian flying fox. When you first see a flying fox, I think you sort of really are taken aback just for how big they are. And this species is attracted to the reserve because they have so many fruiting trees, particularly figs. And you rarely actually find them out in sort of pristine habitats and sort of primary forests, things like that, because fruiting trees just don't occur at the same density as they do in areas with human habitation. So even sort of around Colombo, you'll find quite a lot of flying foxes. And the lodge has some very exciting mammals that visit. They're not necessarily always on site, but they do come into the lodge from time to time. And here's some camera trap footage to show some of those species. They're all sort of coming into the reserve, usually through this sort of Loris reserve at the back where we walk. And the first one up we've got is a fishing cat. Then we've got a rusty spotted cat, and then some Indian crested porcupines and a white spotted chevrotain that I was pleased to get on my own camera trap when I was there. That hopefully gives you a feel of just how many interesting species are found just within the lodge. And in addition to these, in addition to doing a night walk, what we usually do is head out after dinner on a fairly extended night drive. This is because although we have chances of seeing some of these cats, particularly um, in the sort of grounds, it is easier to find them out on a night drive. So what we do is take sort of safari-style jeeps out into the surrounding landscape, and we're going spotlighting through, it's not pristine national parks, but through a series of rice paddies, forests, wetlands, even the edges of villages, looking for lots of species. This gives us much better chances for a wider range of these nocturnal mammals. One that we hope to find as well is this, the jungle cat, quite a large member of the small cat family and a rodent sort of specialist, really. And at the time of year we run this trip, late March, early April, the rice paddies are being cut, and this exposes the burrows of many of the rodents which thrive in these rice paddies, with an abundance of sort of food for them. The rodents are occurring at high densities, and this attracts lots of predators. So jungle cats particularly make the most of this. And when the fields have been cut, it's a great time for the jungle cats to be making the most of finding these rodents, and also for us to find the jungle cats because the grass is much shorter and it's easier to locate them. This is the other species we really hope to find. It's the fishing cat again. They're a really robust cat as well, capable of taking quite large prey. They are, however, as the name suggests, a specialist of aquatic environments. They do spend a lot of time sat at the edges of water bodies, where they'll be particularly trying to catch fish and amphibians. And they've got specially adapted claws and paws to help them even hunt and catch fish fully submerged underwater. Very few other cats can do this, and fishing cats are very much a habitat specialist. They're never far from wetlands. And there's a good population of them because there's a good network of well-populated lakes in the Sigiriya area. So it's a species we really hope to find. This is the other one that we do hope to find as well, but it is a little more challenging. It's the rusty spotted cat. This is actually the world's smallest feline. Many of them can be smaller than a domestic cat, about 35 centimeters in length. They're found in India as well, but there's a unique subspecies found in Sri Lanka, and actually a different population that's unique to the wet zone, to the dry zone. And this is a species that's thought to be generally naturally rare. They're not ever found to have occurred in high densities, even in areas that seem like they would be ideal, and they're not persecuted. But they are a difficult species to find, being so small. They keep in dense cover where they hunt. And this means they're generally quite hard to study. So there's not as much information known about rusty spotted cats. We'll also be looking for civets in addition to these beautiful cats. This is the small Indian civet, and we'll be looking for these on the ground. They're a ground-dwelling species that predominantly eats rodents and frogs, insects. It will scavenge and also take opportunities to feed on fruit as well. We'll also be looking for two species of palm civet. This is the common palm civet, and there's also the golden palm civet, which we'll hope to find. The golden palm civet is endemic to Sri Lanka, and again, like the rusty spotted cat, there are two forms found in the wet and dry zones. And these palm civets are generally found up in the trees, particularly the golden palm civet is thought to be primarily arboreal, so very rare to actually come across them on the ground. And as the name suggests, they are very fond of palms, and fruits in general make up much more of their diet than the small Indian civet. Another nocturnal species we hope to find. This is the white-spotted chevrotain, or mouse deer. It's a endemic as well to Sri Lanka, and this species can be found in the day, but it's much more likely we'll find them at night. They're a tiny species of deer, and again, sort of keep generally to sort of forest edge and dense undergrowth. In addition to looking for all these exciting mammals, we'll be coming across night birds as well, so nocturnal nightjars, and at least sort of 2 or 3 species of owl are quite likely. This is Indian nightjar. And in addition to birds as well, reptiles and frogs are something we'll come across. Quite often, we'll find snakes, particularly basking on the tarmac of some of these roads we explore at night. They do that because the tarmac retains the heat much more, and this is a good way for them to warm up and get some energy before an evening of foraging. This is a green vine snake, a very striking and beautifully camouflaged species, something we have good chances of finding just in roadside vegetation. But there's all sorts of things that are possible. Lots of frogs that we could come across too. During the day, we'll usually spend our mornings relaxing, catching up on sleep, and enjoying the sort of facilities of our lovely accommodation. So we ensure we have time for that as well. But then in the afternoons, after lunch, we'll usually set out for an afternoon daytime activity. And one of the first of these is to visit a beautiful area of primary, so pristine, untouched forest, just up the road from our accommodation. And here we can explore the forest for these. These are purple-faced leaf monkeys, although they really shouldn't be called that because they have very dark grey and black faces. They're again another endemic. And again, they are found across the island with different subspecies found in the wet, dry, and hill country. They're quite a shy monkey as well. And normally they wouldn't sort of allow people to get too close to them. They will usually retreat to the tops of the trees if they see people. But here we go out with some researchers that have been habituating a troop of 10 individuals that allow us to get good views of them and learn much more about their biology and ecology and some of the threats they face. Whilst exploring this reserve, there's plenty of bird life and some fantastic butterflies. We also hope to find some good reptiles. This is a hump-nosed lizard, another endemic, bit of a dragon resembling species, which is very cool to see. And then one afternoon, we'll also visit Sigiriya Rock. So obviously the history there is incredible, but it's a great place to have close up and sort of intimate encounters with these. These are tok macaques. They're also endemic, and the females have these red faces, and they have these cheek pouches, which they often fill with fruits and keep them sort of stored in there, sort of caching them for later. And quite often, you'll find sort of youngsters coming up trying to extract some of the fruit from them, and it's quite interesting to see the sort of interactions between different members of the family while they try to share out these fruits. We'll also see lots of grey langurs in this area as well. And then we'll also spend some afternoons doing sort of dedicated elephant safaris. The areas around Sigiriya have a very high density of elephants. They can even sometimes be seen just from the sort of public roads as you drive around sort of late or early in the day. But there's a couple of national parks and one in particular that we aim to visit, which has sort of lower numbers of other visitors. So it's nice for having more intimate sightings. That's called Kalawiwa National Park. And here we can have some really nice intimate encounters with elephants. The Sri Lankan elephant is a endemic subspecies again. They're also the largest of all Asian elephants. And what's interesting about Kalawiwa particularly is the elephants here, the male elephants, I should say, it's only male elephants that have tusks. And in Kalawiwa, there is a slightly larger percentage of male elephants with tusks. And across Sri Lanka, only about 7 to 10% of male elephants still have tusks. This is sadly probably as a result of thousands of years of hunting and domestication of Asian elephants in Sri Lanka. They've had a long history of being domesticated there, and that has probably favoured individuals that didn't grow tusks, or at least shorter tusks as well. So it is really nice when we can see some tusked elephants here. Another feature of Sri Lankan elephants, in addition to their size, they're also particularly dark skinned, and quite a few of them also have these areas of depigmentation. So often on the face and the ears, they have areas that are sort of lacking in pigmentation. It's not really known why this is and why it's found in the Sri Lankan population so much, but it's another sort of interesting feature of them. So as we move on from Sigiriya, we head towards Wilpatu, and as we go there, we call in at the ancient city of Andanapapura, and this is one of the sort of oldest settlements within Sri Lanka. It's been there for a very long time, um, and this was sort of really the birthplace of Buddhism within Sri Lanka. When we go there, we can see some of the stupas and the Bodhi tree that has a lot of connections to when Buddhism was first introduced to the country. And while India is predominantly Hindu, Sri Lanka is predominantly Buddhist. About 70% of the population there identify as Buddhists. And it's a fascinating site to just learn a lot more about Sri Lanka's history. So this is where we stay. This is Clawton Wild on the edge of Wilpatu National Park. It's not quite as fancy as Vilayana, but it's probably the most comfortable accommodation option in the Wilpatu area. And we explore the park using these sort of modified four-wheel drives. This is how all kind of game drives take place in Sri Lanka and much of Asia. They're not quite the same as what you can have in Africa, but still very comfortable. And this is the rest camp within Wilpatu National Park. It's a great place to stop for toilets, and there's places to have lunch here. And Wilpatu, it's a beautiful national park. It's the largest and oldest in Sri Lanka as well. And although it has slightly increased in terms of its numbers of visitors in recent years, it's still relatively quiet in terms of numbers compared to some of the more famous national parks, such as the Block 1 of Yala, particularly. So there's plenty of areas in which we can escape any sort of building up of vehicles and find things on our own here. It's a much more densely forested park as well. And this sort of shade cover means that a lot of animals remain active throughout the day. So there's good sightings to be had, even sort of 11 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. So it's a very rewarding park. Another feature of it is these vilus, or sort of they're man-made lakes, really, from when this area was home to an ancient civilization. They were digging these waterways for water and irrigation for agriculture at the time. And now this supports a very high density of some animals. So this means that we have, good variety of wildlife we can find here. This is Sri Lankan spotted deer. And it's worth also mentioning that Wilpatu was for many years closed to tourism because of the civil war, which was affecting the north of the country more for longer. And this has resulted in some of the animals being a little less habituated to vehicles than you might find in some other areas. But in many instances, they are very used to seeing people, and we can get very good views of them. Around the water bodies, there's nearly always activity. They're great places just to sit and watch and see what comes along. And you'll find things like this. This is a pheasant-tailed jacana, very beautiful bird that we find on nearly every other lake within Wilpatu. And while we don't see big herds of elephants in much of Wilpatu, although there are some areas that is possible, we tend to see more bull elephants just out and around these lakes. So it's a great place to just sit and watch and see what comes and goes. And we often have elephants here. Other mammals, this is water buffalo. The population in Sri Lanka is generally now a mix of both domesticated water buffalo and the wild water buffalo. So they sort of hybridized a bit. There's lots of wild boar as well, which we can often see quite close to the roads. This is a samba deer, the largest species of deer we can find. There's also muntjac, a small species, and we can see things like ruddy mongooses and these grizzled giant squirrels, which is one of the national animals of Sri Lanka. And we also hope to find these. This is golden jackal, and we nearly always find these in pairs. They're monogamous and mate for life. And sadly, even if one of the adults passes away, it usually means the other doesn't live too long as well. They do sort of mate for life, really. And you'll often find small groups of them with a sort of recent litter of them as well. So it's another animal we hope to see. Here they are no longer very nocturnal, so they're again much more active in the day as well. And when we're not finding mammals, there's plenty of bird life to distract us as well. This is changeable hawk eagle, and this is a species we can often find just perched up close to the roads, giving us incredible views like this. There's a fantastic range of bird life, and much of it very spectacular, very colourful, very showy. This is a coppersmith barbet. This one's not quite so colourful, but it's called a white rump charmer, and it has one of the most beautiful melodious songs that sort of we hear as we enter the park. It's a great way to kick off a day in Wilpatu with the song of white rump charmers, peacocks, and listening out for the alarm calls of langurs. And then there's also species like brown fish owl. We quite often come across these in their day roosts, which is great to be able to see owls in the day. Around the water holes, there's nearly always different bird life. This is great thickney. They're usually sort of a crepuscular and nocturnal species, but we see them in the day here as well, and look quite dinosaur-like. Then there's things like big flocks of egrets, ibises, storks, herons, and this is Asian open-bill stork. This species is actually quite well named. It does have a specially adapted open bill, which is perfect for extracting the hard and soft parts of freshwater snails. Now, I know what you might be thinking here. Why did this chicken cross the road? Well, it's a Sri Lankan jungle fowl, and this is another endemic. It's also the national bird of Sri Lanka. And the males have a tendency to actually forage along the sides of the roads and the tracks. The females, particularly, are quite sort of skulking and keep to the dense cover more, but the males tend to sort of come out and forage along the sides of the track. And in addition to birds, there's lots of reptiles to enjoy as well. This is Indian soft-shelled turtle. This is Indian star tortoise. And there's also things like Bengal monitor lizards, lots of crocodiles, various species of lizard. And if we're very lucky, we hope to find this. This is Indian chameleon. Wilpatu is one of the better places to find this species. And then what Wilpatu is certainly most famous for, the Sri Lankan leopard. And these Sri Lankan leopards are, again, an endemic subspecies. They have beautiful golden eyes and quite close knit rosettes, which differentiate them from Indian leopards even. And they are the largest among most leopard populations. There's some debate as to whether Persian leopards are actually bigger, but certainly Sri Lankan leopards are among the biggest. And one of the reasons for this is that the fact that they are the apex predator in Sri Lanka. In the absence of lions and tigers, which they have to contend with in most of their range, Sri Lankan leopards are the top cat, and this has enabled them to probably grow larger, along with high abundance of prey and protection in some areas. But also their behaviour has changed as well. We find that they are less nocturnal, and they tend to spend less time in trees. They don't drag their kills up into trees as much because there's less need to protect them from larger predators or scavengers. And we quite often find them just using the tracks and roads within places like Wilpatu a lot more. That they much prefer to sort of walk along sandy tracks when patrolling their territory, sort of stepping on noisy leaf litter in the forest. They're a really beautiful animal, and Wilpatu, along with parts of Yala, has some of the highest densities of leopards anywhere in the world. It's hard to say exactly which location has the highest density, but Wilpatu certainly has a lot of them. And we will be looking for them early morning and evening, but we even have chances to see them, like I said, even sort of around 11 in the morning. We've been having sightings, and they're quite often sort of quite brazenly just walk out into the open. They're not so worried about other predators here, and they're well protected in Wilpatu, so we can get some fantastic sightings of them. Another species we really hope to see here is Sri Lankan sloth bear. Again, this species has a distinct population in Sri Lanka, and unlike most bears around the world, sloth bears have a pretty restrictive diet. They're on the way to being quite a specialist, actually, a bit like giant pandas, in that they feed for sort of 70% of the year. They're feeding on termites, also ants and a few other invertebrates, but mainly on termites. And they have flexible lips and special adaptations, including incredibly powerful claws for digging, which enable them to feed on this food source, which is rich in protein and widely available. And only at a certain time of the year, which is usually sort of end of May to July, they switch to feeding on fruit. And at that time, they particularly favour the fruit of the palu tree. And after a while of gorging on these fruits, they can sort of end up having quite a lot of fermented fruit. And this has been known to make them tipsy. Although they sort of bumble around anyway, they bumble around even more at the end of this fruiting season, which is quite a fun time to observe them. And driving around the park, we often find huge gatherings of butterflies wherever there's sort of drying up water on the tracks or around sort of edges of pools. We find huge gatherings of butterflies, such as these lemon immigrants, which are a migratory species. And as the sort of vehicle approaches, and they all sort of fly up in a big swarm. It's really spectacular. And in addition to the wildlife we can see during the day in Wilpatu, the areas around our lodge and the sort of buffer zone of the park are again excellent for the small cats, the civets, porcupines, and again we'll be hoping to try and find jungle cat, fishing cat, and rusty spotted cat. And these species are difficult, so we will have to put effort into finding them. But we do have good chances. They are known to occur in quite high densities in the buffer zone of Wilpatu. So we'll be looking for them. We'll be doing slightly less longer night drives when we're in Wilpatu because we'll be going out in the day as well. So in order to sort of give ourselves some time out, we'll concentrate our longer night drives in the Sigiriya area. On one day as well, we head over to the coast and we start with a boat trip crossing the Kalpitia Lagoon. This is an area of shallow water and lots of mangroves, which separates sort of the Kalpitia Peninsula, which is a long stretch of sort of sand heading out into the sea. And this sheltered lagoon is the home of these, which are Indo-Pacific humpback dolphins. They're actually critically endangered now, and sadly have lost a lot of their habitat across their range in Asia. But on this lagoon, there's a resident population, and we have good chances to find them. So that's our first dolphin we hope to see. We then head across and change boats to head offshore for a couple of hours, where we head to an area. So off Kalpitia, we are very close to the continental shelf of the Indian subcontinent. So there's some deep canyons under the sea here, as well as lots of nutrient-rich water flowing down from what's known as Adam's Bridge between India and Sri Lanka. So this creates perfect conditions for a good variety of marine life. And at the time of year of this trip, we have excellent chances to encounter super pods of long-nosed spinner dolphins. This individual is demonstrating that. They do these incredible rotations. They're not called spinner dolphins for nothing. It's thought they do this for communication, to potentially remove parasites, and also just for fun. And it really just makes your heart sing to watch this. They're just incredible animals, and to have them sort of doing this often in super pods. When I was there, we think we may have come across a pod close to 1,000 individuals, which is mind blowing. You sort of don't know quite where to look, and it feels like the sea can be bubbling. So it's just it's so heartwarming to be surrounded by so much life. They're a beautiful animal. And we take boats like this out. So it's quite simple, but we're only going out for a couple of hours out to sea. The dolphins are actually usually quite close. We can usually find them within sometimes 20 minutes from leaving the shore. And then we'll call in at the coast there for lunch, and there'll be often lots of crabs around, like these hermit crabs and ghost crabs and fiddler crabs. And making our way back towards Wilpatu, we'll call in at some wetlands where there'll be good numbers of overwintering and a few passage waders still on there, still about to head back. So they're sort of northern breeding grounds, lots of lesser sand plovers and little stints, curlew sands. And quite often we'll see lots of these white-bellied sea eagles as well. Occasionally they'll fly over these flocks and put them all up, which is quite a sight. So that's to sum up the Sri Lanka's rare mammals in style. It's a great itinerary for essentially an overview of what makes the natural history of Sri Lanka so special. And the next itinerary I wanted to talk to you about tonight is our leopard and sloth bear photo safari. This is again a new itinerary. It's led by our good friend and tour leader, Sean Weekly. He's a phenomenal photographer, and this itinerary follows the sort of format that we have for many of our photography trips, where we have usually just a single base. On this trip, we do have a couple of nights either side of our main destination, just to break up the journey and take in a few different habitats, have great photography opportunities too, particularly of bird life. But the main format of this trip is to have a single base, and this is a great format we found for our photography trips. It's a nice slow pace, gives us plenty of time to really get to know a park in detail. So for this trip, we're based at Kumana National Park, which is a a fairly seldom known park, which actually borders the more famous Yala. And I'm sorry, Kumana has again an exceptional density of leopards. And what's beautiful about this park is at most you might see 5 or 6 other vehicles in the entire park in a day. They will obviously share news of sightings and things, but we can essentially enjoy exploring this park on our own and find lots of exciting animals on our own. So it's a great destination for taking our time, enjoying what we see, following it, having great opportunities to make the most of the light and different behavior. And Sean did a recce of this trip in September this year, which is when we run the trip. And across this park, and also some time he spent in Wilpattu, he saw an incredible 16 different leopards, which just goes to show the potential of these areas. And yeah, Kumana is fantastic for its leopards. And we have timed this trip at the end of the dry season when there's very little water outside of some big water holes. So all the sort of small streams and puddles and pools of water that sometimes leopards will go to in amongst rocks and things, they've all dried up. So the leopards are much more concentrated alongside pretty much all the mammals in the park around the remaining water sources. So this does mean that where we're looking for the leopards is more concentrated, and we particularly hope to have opportunities to actually photograph them coming down to drink and taking that first lap of water. The other species we hope to see here and hopefully get a good photo opportunity with is sloth bear again. They're a very charismatic bear, and what's quite rewarding about them is the fact that they aren't easy to photograph. They quite often have their heads down to the ground. They don't tend to stay in one place for very long. Unlike sort of brown bears and black bears, they are sort of generally on the move quite a lot. But that's what makes them so special when we do get a really good sighting of them. And with Sean, I should say these are Sean's pictures, and with Sean on hand, there'll be plenty of opportunities to be really creative with the wildlife you're seeing. There's again a good elephant population in Kumana, and we can see them in all sorts of different backgrounds and photogenic sort of settings. And then there's bird life, and we will enjoy sort of photographing everything we sort of come across here. Although leopards and bears and elephants will obviously take all of our attention, we'll enjoy everything the park has to offer. And there's a lot of very photogenic birds. This is a green bee eater, and we'll often see many of these species just perched up at the roadsides. Things like Malabar pied hornbills, and often these birds almost seem to be asking to be photographed. They sort of fly and perch and yeah, quite happy to sort of sit there while we enjoy them. And then there's lots of small stuff too. One day we do hope to sort of spend a full day in Kumana. There's a really nice spot by the river where we'll probably stop to have lunch in the shade and enjoy some cool drinks. And we can also indulge in a bit of macro photography there. There's good opportunities with things like this garden lizard and all the small stuff. And then there's the bird life. We've got some really good wetlands around Kumana and a good range of species that we can see, as well as on some of the stops that we do on the way to and from the park as well. This is spot-billed pelican, species that Sean particularly loves to photograph out in Greece as well. And this is where we stay. It's a fantastic accommodation called Jetwing Surf. It's not obviously in the park itself, but the drive into the park, it takes about 45 minutes, and most of that drive is through sort of wildlife habitat. But having this as our base is lovely. We've got really nice facilities. We can even enjoy photographing the ghost crabs on the beach if we want to, and enjoy, yeah, there's the facilities and going through editing, things like that while we're here. And then the last trip I wanted to go through really was this, which is our Sri Lanka in depth. This is a trip led by Ed Hutchings, a fantastic naturalist who will be leading this trip, which is our essentially most comprehensive itinerary in Sri Lanka. Sorry, it's 16 days in length, again, starts and ends in Colombo. And the idea of this trip is to really show you all of the different habitats and each of those climatic zones within Sri Lanka. So we begin at Blue Magpie Lodge and the Sinharaja Forest, which is in the wet zone. From there, we head up into the hill country, where we stay in Nura Elia and visit Horton Plains National Park. From there, we head to Galoya National Park, which is in the intermediate zone, sort of still a mixture of habitats there. And then we head down to the dry zone, where we visit a couple of parks. The first is Lungumavera, which is again a park that borders Yala. Yala has been broken up into lots of different blocks. And from where we stay here, we're not near the block one, which is the very busy, sort of overly busy park, part of the park that's best avoided. But we here we can explore block 5, block 3, block 6 even, and this park, which is again known for its leopard density. And we also finish with Udawalawe National Park, which is another great park for elephants, but a good range of other wildlife too. So, starting with the Sinharaja forest, this is the largest tract of primary lowland rainforest left in Sri Lanka. It's an area of forest that's really remained isolated as well for a long time. There's lowland forest, tropical forest in the Western Ghats of India, but this area has been isolated from that for a very long time. So it's where the greatest concentration of endemic species can be found in Sri Lanka. One of the headline birds here is the Sri Lanka blue magpie. A real sort of flagship bird for this national park, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site as well. And the birding here is phenomenal. In addition to endemics such as this, which is a Sri Lanka frogmouth, which is a nocturnal bird, which the local park guides are phenomenal at finding in its day roost. Another colourful bird, but a superbly cryptic and camouflaged species is, I think, equally as beautiful. These birds sort of feed on insects. That's why they have such a big mouth and called frog mouths. And to highlight just how rich these rainforests are, this species, the Serendip scopsow, had remained unknown for a very long time. It was only in the early 2000s that this species was first heard, and then a few years later actually observed for the first time and categorized as a new species. So it's the Serendip scopsow, again endemic just to the Sinharaja and Kitugala rainforests. And incredibly, despite being so new to science, so recently, our local guides have staked out roost sites for it, and we again have great chances to see this highlight species. So moving on from the rainforest, we head up into the hill country, passing some of those lovely tea plantations, where we'll of course stop to sample some of the tea. And here we are in Horton Plains National Park, which is a completely different environment again. This is a montane grassland, and there's also good areas of cloud forest here. This park is again another hotspot for endemics and lots of species that have adapted just to the sort of higher altitude microclimates that are found up here. The park is grazed by lots of sambar deer, and actually leopards are seen here from time to time, but it's not a reliable place to see them. But if you do, it's a nice bonus. The bird life here is fantastic as well. This is probably one of the most difficult birds of the endemics to find. It's Sri Lanka whistling thrush. And in addition to this, we also have, at this time of year, this trip is run over sort of February, which is when lots of the winter migrants are in Sri Lanka. So not only Northern European species, but also species from sort of further up in Asia. So we have things like pied thrush and Kashmir flycatcher, which breed high up in the Himalayas in the summer and then spend the winter in these hills in Sri Lanka. So some of those species are extremely difficult to see on their breeding grounds, but we have, much easier access to them here in Sri Lanka in the winter. In addition to brilliant bird life, there's reptiles too. This is a rhino horned lizard, and there's also two other locally endemic sort of range restricted species, the black-lipped lizard and the tiny pygmy Sri Lanka lizard, both of which we can find here. And then there's the frogs. So this is a Horton Plains shrub frog, and of 120 species of amphibian found in Sri Lanka, 107 of these are endemic. So a lot of those species are restricted to very small geographical areas where they are specialists of usually quite niche forest types, and they're very susceptible to change, so very precious to look after, and fascinating to see just how many of these species have evolved here in the isolation. After our time in Horton Plains, we head to Galoya National Park. This is another park that's quite off the beaten track still. There's very few accommodation options there yet, but there is a nice place we stay at called Wild Glamping Galoya. And here we go out with the local Veda tribe. And the Veda are indigenous tribe to Sri Lanka. They've lived naturally in the forest there for a very long time, and they still live as they have for all those years. But we go out with some of them to find the wildlife of this area. There's again some local specialities in the bird life, things like yellow-footed green pigeon and painted francolin. But we also take a boat trip on a reservoir. This area has actually been purposely flooded to provide water for the sort of peoples of that area. And on this reservoir, we find some incredibly big mugger crocodiles. So that's the first thing we'll be finding. But then we'll be hoping to see elephants from boats. And here we actually have very good chances to see elephants swimming, which is something you don't often get to see. And there's quite a few islands within this reservoir, and the elephants are swimming between these. So sometimes all you might see is just something that you sort of think, is that Nessie? Or, oh no, wait, it's an elephant trunk snorkeling across the sort of deeper parts of the reservoir. And as I said, we then head down into the sort of Lunga Vera National Park. So again, look for species within the dry zone. We hope to find leopard. We visit Bundala National Park, which is an area of coastal wetlands, brilliant for birding. Saltwater crocodiles we can find there too. And then we finish up in Udawalawe National Park. It's a great place to finish. Again, we have pretty much guaranteed elephants. Shouldn't ever say that, but Udawalawe is home to a huge elephant population. And it's a wonderful place to finish with nice numbers of mammals, birds, and very nice accommodation too. And lastly, I just wanted to mention this incredible animal. We also have another itinerary, which is called Blue Whales, Dolphins and Leopards. And this itinerary features some of the areas we've talked about already, Wilpatu, Lungavera, but it also features Marissa, which is on the south coast of Sri Lanka. And Marissa is a very unique area for whale watching. This is because the continental shelf is again very close to the shore here. It's sort of unusually close, really. So we've got these deep water canyons, and again, nutrient-rich waters bringing lots of krill and things at certain times of the year into the sort of areas that are actually accessible with just a half-day boat trip from land. Blue whales are a pelagic deep sea species, and normally it'd be very rare to be seeing them so close to shore. But Marissa has traditionally been among the best places in the world to see blue whales. But it's important to mention that in recent years, particularly in the last couple of years, the sightings of them have unfortunately reduced. They are still being seen, but not with the frequency and numbers that they once were. This is There's lots of theories as to why this might be. Most likely, in recent years, though, it is because of the El Nino weather pattern, and currently we've got a La Nina which follows El Nino. This changes the sea temperatures across much of the world, particularly the Indian Ocean does get affected. So it's likely that the whales are just feeding in different areas. We know this is happening in many other parts of the world, and it's hoped that the blue whales particularly will come back in number in the coming years. But even if we're not lucky with blue whale, we have excellent chances to see lots of other cetaceans on these boat trips. Brooder's whale, in particular, is a resident off the coast here, and both sperm and fin whales regularly pass through. There's also even occasional sightings of orca, and certainly pilot whale and pantropical spotted, small numbers of spinner dolphin, and even things like green turtle, whale shark, all sorts of things do turn up because we've got a great combination of deep water and nutrient rich sort of marine life here. So it's a fantastic place as well. And that's on our blue whales, dolphins, and leopards. So just to sort of sum up, we've got 4 group trips, which I think HB will put up in our poll shortly. And just to give a bit of an overview of each of these, Sri Lanka's rare mammals in style. This was our first itinerary. Gives a fantastic overview of the general natural history of Sri Lanka. And that's a trip we do in late March, early April. That's the best time for that part of the country with the weather, but also with the mammals that we're trying to see and the dolphins up in Kalpithia. Our leopard and sloth bear photo safari, we run that with Sean in September. And that's because that's the best time of year for maximizing leopard and sloth bear photographic opportunities at the very end of a dry season in the southeast corner of a country. And then our Sri Lanka in depth, that trip is run over our winter, so in February. That's the best time in the southwest corner of Sri Lanka, which is where we're going to the wet zone and the hill country. And that's also when not only it's driest then, but also the migratory winter bird species can be found as well. So it adds to the range of species we can see. And then our blue whales, dolphins, and leopards is run over November and February as well, because this is the perfect time for whale activity and good weather conditions in the areas down in the south as well. So I hope that's given you an overview of why Sri Lanka is just such a paradise island, really. It has so much to offer. In addition to, incredible wildlife, it's just a really nice place to visit. The people are so friendly. There's so much to see, history, the food, of course, and you're very well looked after. So I hope that's been helpful. And I think that's probably all from me if you're around, HB.
I am, yes. Thank you so much, Ian. Crikey. I think Peter has just left a comment that I think sums that up entirely. He said, goodness me, there's a fascinating diversity of wildlife there. So thank you. I think you deserve a big glug of water to gather yourself after such an amazing talk. And I am about to launch a poll, but before I do, it says on the screen, are there any questions? So I just have to ask you, very tongue in cheek, why did the jungle fowl cross the road? So sorry, couldn't resist. No, that's not a proper question. Right. Okay. So essentially, with regards to all of these wonderful trips, we're about to launch a poll, which is coming your way now. So if you would like a travel plan emailed to you for any of the 4 trips that Ian has just talked you through, please do get in touch, and we will get them off to you prontissimo in the next day or two. So I'm just going to leave that on the screen while you do so. So please, just if you want all of them, have a good read. There's clearly an awful lot to see there. But while people are doing that, Ian, can I ask you some proper questions, please?
Absolutely.
You mentioned walking on your trip, the rare mammals trip. Can you just, you mentioned that the landscape was generally relatively flat, but can you give us an idea in kilometers or minutes, hours? How long are you walking for in the evenings, please?
Yeah, sure. So the walks we do within the grounds of the lodge there are, they would be at maximum sort of 40 minutes really. We're covering a sort of small route that takes in this Loris Reserve and looking around some of the lakes and the sort of marshy habitats around. It's all very level. There's a couple of areas that will have a little bit of sort of tree roots and a couple of bridges we cross where the trails get a little bit narrower, but it's all generally flat and easy going. I would say we're not really covering more than at most sort of very most 2 kilometers really on that walk. It's very short going. We do have another walk we do in the forest reserve not far away. That is again quite short in duration. At most, probably we might be walking for 2 or 3 kilometers, all very slow paced as we're stopping to look at things. We're taking our time, and that one there is a bit of a hilly area there, so potentially we never know quite where the leaf monkeys will be and some of the other things, but we may have to go a little bit uphill at times, potentially a bit off piste as well, so not necessarily on a sort of designated track as we're finding the monkeys, but you'll be very well looked after, and there may be just a few sort of tree roots and rocks and things and a bit of uphill, but it's nothing too strenuous, and we take it very slow and steady.
Brilliant. Thank you. Andrew asked that with relation to your trip again, the fact that you are doing extended night drives on your quest for the nocturnal rare mammals and everything else, and also you have this walk as well. What happens? You talked about relaxing in the mornings, and yet from his perspective, he's found photography, the light is good in the early mornings, and also birds and so on. Will there be activities in the mornings before you relax or after, or?
Yeah, there is. So when we're at Villa, we can take plenty of walks around the lodge grounds. The reason we haven't planned too much early in the morning then is because we don't want to sort of put too much pressure on with doing a late evening night drive where we might be coming back at midnight or something, and then trying to get up at before sunrise to get out somewhere, because you know that will soon get too tiring. Where
Then
we
you
are
holiday.
exactly. So we can still make the most of sort of late afternoon light, and where we will be sort of doing more early mornings is in Wilpa 2, where we will sort of take it easier with the night drives. So hopefully we will actually see most of our sort of target nocturnal species when we're in Sigiriya, so we can spend more time getting out early in Wilpatu. But we will sort of mix things up and keep things flexible to just ensure that, yeah, we have time for rest and sleep, and for just pottering in the grounds as well. But yeah, making sure we're making the most of the times of day and when things are active.
Lovely, thank you. Being national parks, I'm assuming that you can't go off-road, but Alison is asking.
Yeah, unfortunately, national parks in Sri Lanka, they don't allow you to. I mean, you can sort of deviate a little bit when you're turning around and things, but generally speaking, you're restricted to the designated park roads and tracks.
Brilliant. Thank you. And then one last question that we have. Obviously, Sean's trip is aimed at photographers. So you'll spend more time in situ on sightings and so on and making most of the light. On the other 3 group trips that you mentioned, clearly there will be photographic opportunities, but how much consideration is given to keen photographers on those trips?
Okay, great stuff. Yeah, on basically all of our trips, we're always trying to facilitate photography, and we will do our best to make the most of all the opportunities that present themselves, basically. So, although they're not dedicated photography trips, so we will have to be a little bit mindful of not spending hours, over one sighting, and we will try to first and foremost ensure everyone is having a good view of something first. We're always going to be trying to maximize photo opportunities, and Sri Lanka lends itself very well to that. A lot of what we'll be seeing does offer very good photographic opportunities, particularly in Wilpatu and with elephants in Sigiriya, a lot of the primates. The nocturnal species, and some of the bird life on the in-depth trips, they are usually a bit more challenging, and it can be very just dependent on an individual and the sighting. That's the way with wildlife generally, but we'll always try to sort of, yeah, make the most of the sightings and try to get the best photo opportunities we can.
Lovely. Right. Well, I think you needed a well-deserved evening off after that. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for joining us. And could you just possibly move your slide on to the very last one, please, Ian? And then I can tell you all about the discount code if anybody would like to join us in Sri Lanka. We are offering £100 off any of the group trips. And also then I can tell you about the next presentations that are coming up. Here we go. So we have the wonderful, the one and only, the personality that is larger than life, Mr. Nick Atchison, talking about Norfolk on the 26th of November. And then I will be hosting Mr. Brett Charman, photographer extraordinaire, as he talks about his Svalbard trip on the 28th of November. And I shall be obviously talking about mine briefly as well. So once again, thank you so much, Ian. That was really enjoyable. We've had a number of people say what an excellent talk it was. So jam-packed, full of wildlife from the wonderful island of Sri Lanka. And on that note, we'll leave you. So it's good night from him and it's good night from me. I don't know if I've done that right. I'm not sure I'm old enough, but there we are. Enjoy. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Good evening.